Hello everybody, my name is Spoons Rattling, and it is Points Update Day. We will be getting another update in a couple months for the balanced data slate, which will more change rules for factions. This is mainly just points, with a couple FAQs here and there, which we will sort of touch on. The main one we want to touch on is just that my interpretation of Soul Link was right. For the Chaos Space Marines, they get to use that ability even if it has already been used by the first character that they're copying the ability from, and also Vashdor can use some of the stratagems from the Soul Forged Warp Pack. But let's start with the Chaos Marines. Am I going to have to... Oh, geez, what the heck? Eldari, Astra Militarum, Chaos Space Marines. So, let's go through these one by one. Abaddon the Spoiler, down from 295 to 280. I think Abaddon was already a fairly good unit, and he's just better now. I think he's much stronger. I don't think this is going to change too much. He was solid before for his big buffs, and he was solid now. Probably not so much in like Pack-Bound Zealots, but certainly in Veterans of the Long War, him with the Combi Bolter Terminators in rapid-fire range, you basically have a free stratagem for 6 mortal wounds. And then Accursed Cultists, which had been seeing a lot of use, did go up in their large squad count from originally 180 to 195. That is certainly a pretty big decrease to the use as big units, just to chew through damage, basically. Though I think this is better for internal codex balance. It is an unfortunate fact that for much of Chaos Space Marines history, cultists have overshadowed their Marine counterparts. And I do generally prefer when the cultists are a tertiary force, really. So Bikers, Land Raider, Lord and Terminator, Jump Pack, they're all the same. The Annihilator did go down, which is very good, because the Annihilator was heavily outclassed by the Destructor at 140 points. But at 130 points, this thing actually packs a lot of firepower for that cost, especially with the twin-linked extra strong las cannon on its turret. The Destructor, Rhino, and Spawn all remain unchanged. They're all going to be... The Predator and the Rhino are both solid, and Spawn can be used as sort of objective secondary units. The Chaos Terminators did get a slight point decrease from 185 to 180, which isn't going to change much, but that is big for me because I run 10 Terminators in every Chaos Space Marine list that I build, and so that combo with Abaddon got a little bit cheaper. Who we're actually going to be painting in a video in the next couple days, or rather a proxy for Abaddon, using an old Chaos Space Marine model. Vindicator, Chosen, Firebrand, Mob, Cypher, and Dark Apostle all remain unchanged. The Vindicator is still a Vindicator, brings that big gun, has a solid save. Chosen are still melee blenders, though very fragile. The Firebrand is whatever. If you need an enhancement on the cheap, that is useful. Cultist mobs remain unchanged, still useful to have a couple around just to tag objectives. Cypher remains unchanged, which is good because Cypher was good before. And the Dark Apostle also remains unchanged, which is fine. I think at that points cost he is solid enough with Chosen, or Legionaries. So Dark Commune did get nerfed pretty heavily. It went up from 65 points to 80 points, which is pretty big, and does make the Dark Commune a lot less interesting as a spam option, especially for, say, for using Accursed Cultists, or even infiltrating big cultist blobs with, like, Deceptors, for example. Defiler remains unchanged. It's still going to be sort of mediocre in most places, but solid in the Soulforge Warp Pack. Fabius Bile remains unchanged. She's still an alright character, in my opinion. The Felgor Beastmen are still too expensive. The Forge Fiend is still 190 points, which is a lot to swallow, but it still brings some pretty solid anti-infantry, light vehicle shooting. Harkin is 90 points. He is still a solid leader for Raptors, to make them more dangerous if you are running Raptors as a damage dealer unit. Havocs I'm really interested in. They dropped 10 points from 135 down to 125, and I think Havocs with 4 las cannons do make pretty solid anti-tank. I always like to include a contingent of anti-tank shooting in my armies, so 2 units of Havocs is probably what I'm going to go for. Just have them sort of stanced up in my back line, especially when I'm playing like Veterans of the Long War, because then they get the reroll hits and they're way more accurate. The Hellbrute is still too expensive. The Helldrake is still too expensive, but he always will be. Demon Prince, I would have liked to see go down a little bit, but I think he's still an alright sort of fighty character. The one with wings obviously gets to melee a lot better and is particularly good in Ruinous Raiders. I mean, that's not right. What is it? Renegade Raiders. Blackheart, Huron Blackheart, still good for his redeploys, but doesn't offer, he's still solid at that points cost. Corn Lord of Skulls is 450 points, again, still good in Soulforge War Pack, and in general is a solid centerpiece in my opinion. Legionary's got an interesting buff, and I think this is useful for Deceptors very much so. 5 models are only 90 points, but then 10 models, you get the second 5 discounted compared to when they were 180 before. Overall, this makes big bulked out units tougher than a smaller unit, really, because you're getting a lot of Marines for cheaper than you were before. And overall, if you want to infiltrate big units of Legionaries, that just got a whole lot cheaper. So Disco Lord got a good bit cheaper, down to 175. I still think he's sort of wanting for a place, but it is nice to see now that he can offer his melee damage in a more consistent way than he could before, and he's not going to be burning a hole in your pocket if you just love to run his model, which, I mean, I can't blame you. That model is sick. And of course, dropping down from 190, that is a very, very sizable points drop. So Master of Execution's still going to be a sort of your standard executioner model, pun not intended. Master of Possession is going to be indirectly buffed. We'll get to that later. Mauler Fiend still murderous in Warforged, Soul War, the Vashtor detachment. Noctilith Crown still too expensive, and it's a fortification, so it's pointless. Obliterators down to 160 is really good because they were way too expensive before. They still offer really flexible firepower with Deep Strike, so again, solid there. Possessed down to 120 points, I think does help them edge out their competition, especially compared to something like Chosen. Now I think they are in the same realm, where before I think they were lagging a little bit behind, so now they are much better. Raptors got the same treatment as Legionaries, where big units of Raptors are cheaper, so that is very solid, very useful if you are a big Raptor fan. Night Lords, if you're running like Harken World Claimer. The Sorcerer and Terminator armor did go down 10 points, which I think makes him a lot more interesting, especially if you can get him like Lone Operative and Deceptors, or just run him with some... and Terminators got cheaper, so that's a nice bonus, because this guy gives them that basically +1 AP buff to one unit within, I think it's 18 inches range. That could still be very useful. For only 80 points, I think that's a solid buff. Trader Enforcer, still sort of just a fun model than anything major. Trader Guardsman at 70 points, definitely outclassed by Cultists for the most part, but still, I think they make fine campers. Vashtor the Archifane went down a pretty sizable amount. Vashtor has dropped from... Oh god, hold on, wait, what's points cost was he? Was it 190? Down to 175, which makes his melee was already good before, but at 175, he is pretty nasty, especially against anti-tank, like against knights and stuff like that. He can be a murderous influence once he gets into combat, especially with a Deep Strike, or with not a Deep Strike, with a Dark Pact. And of course, he has this weird sort of durability thing where when people are attacking him, they risk blowing themselves up, which can be really devastating to certain units. The Venom Crawler remains unchanged, still a fast-moving, relatively durable, good at clearing infantry. Warp Talons got their smaller unit decreased, which is interesting, and makes them slightly more usable as sort of marauder units on your flanks. And their large unit remains unchanged, obviously, because that unit is going to be a lot more efficient at annihilating big units to keep jumping on and off the board. The Warpsmith just remains unchanged. I think that's fine. The Warpsmith is good. He heals, he makes your vehicles shoot better or fight better, and he does what he needs to do. Next up, we are going to cover Orks or Dark Angels, whoever comes up first. Orks. So, Orks got a sweeping amount of changes that makes them significantly better. So, first up, Battle Wagon, still 160 points, still fantastic, one of the best transports in the game. Beast Snagger Boys, down from 105 to 95 points. Does give them a little more ground on boys, but not too much, given that boys also dropped. Makes Beast Snaggers in general a lot more dangerous. The Beast Bosses remain the same, but that's fine, they're both very strong. The Big Mechs all went down 10 points, which makes the Big Mech with Shock Attack Gun and Luda's unit a lot more interesting. And then, of course, the Big Mech and Mega Armor is a lot better now, especially since Mega Knobs are cheaper. So you can make a much tougher unit for a lot cheaper. And the normal Big Mech went down, which he certainly needed to because he lacked a certain place, but if he's cheap, that just means he can be a nice addition to an army. The Big Ed Boss Bunker is a fortification, that's all I need to say about that. Blitzabomber is a flyer. The Boomdak, a Snazwagon, like most of the buggies, is still a little expensive for what it does, but it's still fast and not necessarily tough, but it can deal with infantry alright. Snickrot remains unchanged, still a good lone operative. Boys did go down from 85 to 80 points, which makes them really, really good. They were already fantastic before, and I think they're just even better now. You can get a lot of green skins on the board for very, very cheap now. Burnas remain unchanged, probably still a little bit more niche, but a Burna truck is not only a cool visual, but also I think is still going to remain, could be an interesting option. Burnamum is a plane, Decagent's a plane. Death Dread down to 120, still probably not the most powerful, but as you know, I'm a big Death Dread lover, so seeing this cheaper is good, and the 4 custom Mega Cannon build will still be extremely dangerous in Dread Mob, which seems to be the winner out of this one. Defcoptas are down to 90 points, just an alternative deep striking option to give them some ground on Storm Boys. Though Storm Boys are certainly still better. Flash Kits remain unchanged, they still have a lot of anti-infantry firepower, and for the same cost as Boys, I actually didn't realize that. They certainly do offer quite a lot of value in dealing with elite infantry. Gazgul remains unchanged, which is totally great because Gazgul was powerful before. Gorkanaut at 260 is really good. That it will be very tough to take down. And his shooting is not only solid, but his melee is really good for that points cost. It's basically like a knight level melee, but on something that is, significantly cheaper. It's like 100 points cheaper than the cheapest knight in the game, which is a very large amount. And overall is very solid to see the Gorkanaut get buffed. The Hunter Rig has gone down up to 135 points, which makes the Hunter Rig pretty dang tough, but unfortunately for the Hunter Rig, it's going to continue to be overshadowed by the Kill Rig, which went down to 155 points, which not only makes it a fantastic transport, which it already was, mind you, it is now probably the Orks' best tank model, if you will, just because of how powerful the Whir Tower is with those auto-hitting las cannons, not only for Overwatch, but just in general. To have that accurate firepower in Orks is a very rare opportunity to have, and it is huge news that the Kill Rig has gone down that much, and also the Kill Rig is just a sick model, so I'm always glad when it's good. The Killicans remain unchanged, still sort of the same, tough shock trooper kind of role. Commandos went down to 120 points, so still pretty expensive for how tough they are, but infiltration can be useful. Custom Boosta Blasta, same as the other buggies, low damage, low durability, it's really just not great. Ludas remain unchanged, but given the big mech changes, they are indirectly buffed, and that does make their shooting even better. Mega Knobs, thank God, have gone down to 35 points a model, which is a big drop from 40 and makes them significantly more dangerous and tough for the cost, so you may see more of them, especially outside of just the 2 that accompany Gazgul. You may see that upgraded to 3 that accompany Gazgul, now that you get them for so much cheaper. The Megatrak is probably the best buggy, but still it's a buggy. The mech remains unchanged, which is fine. The mech is great. He doesn't need to be changed. Mech guns remain unchanged. Bubble Chuck is still pretty powerful. If fly is very prevalent, then of course tractor cannons are very good. Morkanaut also goes down, and the Morkanaut I think is significantly better now. I still think the Gorkanaut is better, but the Morkanaut does have more use now that it is a little bit cheaper. Very good for Dread Mob, which seems to be the big winner out of this. Mazrog remains unchanged, Knobs remain unchanged, both still very good. The Pain Boss remains unchanged, still, in my opinion, pretty pointless. The Pain Boy remains unchanged, good for Green Tide. Rucka Truck still sucks. Shock Jump is a solid secondary unit. Squig Hog's unchanged, which is good. The Stompa remains slightly unchanged, though its transport got updated, so now it can transport Gazgul more efficiently. Storm Boys are unchanged, still a great unit to have. Tank Bustas did go down to 90 points, which, Lord, they needed it, but they're expecting their kill team datasheet update soon. Truck's still good, Warbiker's still good, Warboss still good. Warboss and Mega Armor probably more useful now than ever before. Wazbomb's a plane, Weird Boy can be somewhat useful with the jump, Warboy still awful, and Zodgrod is very useful for super runs. And the Gargantuan Squiggoth is still very cool and very tough for the points. Overall, Orcs in a much better position they are now, especially Dreadmob will be really running rampant. Though, of course, Warhorde, Bully Boys, and Bully Boys also got a big buff with Meganobs being much better now. Next up, we have Codex Space Marines, of course. So, mainly buffs here, but a few choice nerfs. Apothecary Biologist up to 70. That's really painful, mainly because he himself really only brings the lethal hits. The rest of his datasheet is pretty bad. The Assault Intercessors with Jump Pack, their small unit got nerfed to 90 points, which doesn't help with some of the other sort of secondary units getting buffs. The Ballistus Dreadnought down to 130. That's pretty huge. Ballistus is very tough. It's got some good guns. Very solid gun turret. The Phobos Captain, good bit cheaper now, down to 70 points. He is very solid for his redeploys. Excuse me. Most of the other captains remain the same, though. The Eradicators go up to 100 points, which certainly isn't great. They still have solid anti-tank firepower, and especially with the Apothecary Biologist, that whole combo got a lot more expensive. Heavy Intercessors down to 95, I think, puts them right back in line with the rest of the Intercessors, and probably outclasses normal Intercessors, in my opinion, and definitely makes them in better contention with Infiltrators for home field camping. The Invaders down at 60, very solid little just buggy to do some secondaries, and I would bring the chain gun, honestly, just to A, it looks cooler, and B, to just clear out some hordes. Tactical Warsuits at a more usable 125, though still not standout in my opinion. The Outriders also got the change of the Invictor being cheaper. Next up we have the Reavers down at 75, and as I covered with the Reavers in the Phobos Lieutenant video, I think Reavers now are actually a pretty credible deep strike secondary unit that can bully light infantry pretty well at 75 points, though they certainly aren't winning any damage contests. Probably the biggest winner here is Rebute Gilliman down at 285, which is a pretty huge, 40-point drop, and makes Gilliman a much more interesting unit. His melee is very good at that cost. He's super tough, and his buffs are very good. We're probably going to see more of the Primarch of the Ultramarines now than ever before. The Storm Speeders all went down, pretty solid for their buffs that they give, especially the one that trips cover, which I believe is the Hammer Strike, if I'm not mistaken. Suppressors down at 75. I know there's a guy I know really likes Suppressors, so he'll be happy about that. They're kind of in contention with Reavers as a deep striking unit for secondaries that can deal with lighter infantry. Terminators down to 185, not a huge decrease, or Assault Terminators rather, down to 180. Not a massive decrease, but better Terminators for cheaper is great. Terminator Squad itself down to 170, super tough for the cost, and also Terminators are up, and I'm always happy about that. Vanguard Veterans did go up to 110, which may seem confusing, but they were seeing a lot of use in Liberator Assault Group. But I think at 110 they'll still be fine there, but they will still be bad elsewhere. Fire Discipline went all the way up to 40, which is not great. Fainting Withdrawal, which allows you fallback and charge from Storm Lamps, went down to 10 points, a fine filler. And Hunter's Instinct, which lets you deep strike turn 1, or reserve turn 1, went up to 25 points. Still going to be good at that points cost, but not quite as efficient. Space Wolves. I'm not super involved with Space Wolves. I just did that video on them yesterday, but I think I'm going to just roll over this as I'm not super familiar. Same with the Tau, Thousand Suns, Tyranids, World Eaters. We got to scroll to the top. Where are the Dark Angels? Dark Angels are right after the Chaos Space Marines. How did I miss that? Let me see. There, Dark Angels. Alright, so Dark Angels overall probably got stronger, despite the fact that two of their top units did get hit. Deathwing models went up 15 points, but Deathwing Knights are still super durable, and they have great damage. At 250 points, they're still going to be good, but just a little more expensive. Azrael went up 10 points to 115, which is still very good for what he brings to a unit of something like Hellblasters, and of course his command point generation. He's one of the cheapest characters that does that. Overall, Azrael's still fantastic. The Landspeeder Vengeance down to 120 points. The Plasma Cannon is still not super good, but at 120 points, it's at least not quite as heavy investment for such a bad weapon. The Lion down to 285 from 300 is a very solid buff and makes the Lion a lot more dangerous. And I think we will be seeing him hit the table quite a lot, which is good because his model is really cool. The Ravenwing Command Squad, which I already thought was a pretty solid data sheet, is down to 120 points, which makes them very dangerous and makes Ravenwing Black Knight significantly better. And Samael, who is still outclassed by the command squad, did drop down to 115. So nothing too major there, but it is an overall nice boost to Ravenwing, though Samael still sucks, and I stand by that. Glad to see the line go down though. So I believe that's all the main factions we want to cover that have any major changes. A lot of other ones just have minor shiftings of points to internal balance, but these are the major ones that I wanted to cover from the factions that I mainly play. Anyways, I've been Spoons Rattling. I hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you all next time.